international friends. It is my pleasure to greet you on the second day of the Security, Science and Peace Conference organized by the Croatian Pugwash Group, a branch of the Pugwash Conferences on Science and World Affairs in cooperation with the World Academy of Art and Science. The conference is held under the high patronage of the President of the Republic of Croatia, Mr. Zoran Milanović, and within the platform, the Conference on the Future of Europe. Our first panel today will examine the role of the non-aligned movement in the contemporary global scene and what can it do for ensuring global security and balance of power in the multipolar world. The non-aligned movement gathered recently in Belgrade, marking the 60th anniversary of the first conference held in 1961, also in Belgrade, in former Yugoslavia. Delegations from more than 100 countries attended the summit, and the main messages were the contribution of the non-aligned movement to world peace, justice, and solidarity. In this panel, we will find out where the movement stands today and what is and should be its vision for the future. Our speakers in the panel are as follows. Former President of the Republic of Croatia, Mr. Stjepan Mesić, the Ambassador of the Republic of Azerbaijan to the Republic of Croatia, His Excellency Mr. Fakhraddin Gurbanov, former Minister of Foreign Affairs and former Chair of the Ministerial Board of the Non-Aligned Movement, Mr. Budimir Lončar, and academician Asim Kurjak, President of the International Academy of Perinatal Medicine and Director of the Jan Donald Inter-University School of Medical Ultrasound. We are very honored to welcome our first speaker, Mr. Stjepan Mesić, former President of the Republic of Croatia in 2 mandates, former Croatian Prime Minister and Speaker of the Croatian Parliament, and Fellow of the World Academy of Art and Science. President Mesić will share his thoughts about the current role of the non-aligned movement and the vision for the future. Gospodine Mesić, izvolite.
Ekscelencije, gospođe i gospodo, poštovani sudionici ovog skupa, sa zadovoljstvom sam prihvatio poziv da iznesem neka svoja razmišljanja na temu uloga pokreta nesvrstani danas. Kažem sa zadovoljstvom jer zaista mislim da o toj temi treba progovarati i to danas, i to ozbiljno. Dakle, ne frazerski, ne nostalgičarski, nego baš ozbiljno i analitično. Moja je polazišna točka, a ujedno i razlog zašto inzistiram na ozbiljnom pristupu, spoznaja da pokret nesvrstanih 60. godina nakon svojeg pojavljivanja na međunarodnoj sceni gubi dah, da upotrebi najblaži mogući izraz. Točnije bi vjerojatno bilo reći kako je od pokreta ostalo samo još većina u Skupštini Ujedinjenih naroda, što nije beznačajno, ali je daleko od toga da bi pokret mogao i morao biti. Da ne kažem koliko je daleko od onoga što je pokret nekada bio. Neću vas zamarati ponavljanje općeg mjesta onoga što je svakome dobro poznato. Kako pokret danas djeluje u promijenjenim uvjetima, kako prilike u svijetu nisu onakve kakve su bile prije 6 desetljeća, kako je globalni okvir za pokret danas nepovoljniji no što je bio kada je se pojavio. Sve je to tako i sve mi to dobro znamo. No, jesu li to, mogu li to biti opravdanja za praktični nestanak pokreta sa međunarodne scene? Možda će nekome zasmetati izraz nestanak s međunarodne scene, ali budimo objektivni i pogledajmo istini u oči. Može li se itko sjetiti ma i jedne spomena vrijedne inicijative pokreta nesvrstanih nakon završetka hladnog rata, preciznije nakon nestanka Berlinskog zida? Ne pamtim ja ni jednu. Ako se radikalna promjena prilika u svijetu može uzeti kao olakotna okolnost, kada nastojimo analizirati zašto su nesvrstani u tišini praktično nestali, onda ta olakotna okolnost može vrijediti samo ograničeno vrijeme. Hoću reći sljedeće: promijenjena situacija na svjetskoj sceni morala je rezultirati time da nesvrstani preispitaju svoje mjesto i ulogu u promijenjenom svijetu. Do toga, međutim, nije došlo. Odgovor na pitanje zašto? Više slojani. Prvo, promjene su bile nagle, za mnoge i neočekivane. Drugo, nestanak blokovske podjele kao da je poništio glavni razlog postojanja pokreta nesvrstanih. I treće, ono najvažnije, tako se barem meni čini, u velikoj skupini nesvrstanih, nedostajali su lideri s vizijom, nedostajali su političari kalibra Nehru, Nasser, Tito, ne zaboravljam ni Sukarna, ni Nikomaha, nije bilo onih koji bi vidjeli i shvatili kako praktični nestanak socijalizma sa svjetske scene, barem onakvog modela kakvog smo do tada poznavali, kako ono što je Zapad shvatio kao svoju pobjedu nad istokom, dakle pobjedu kapitalizma nad socijalizmom, nije dokinulo potrebu postojanja nesvrstanih. Dapače, sve ono čemu smo svjedočili u protekla 3 desetljeća samo je potvrdilo da su nesvrstani i dalje potrebni. Jer što se dogodilo? Zapad je slom socijalizma shvatio kao svoju povijesnu pobjedu i počeo se ponašati na način pobjednika, što je uz ostalo rezultiralo pretvaranjem bipolarnog svijeta u unipolarni. Sjedinjene države prigrabile su i nastojale svim silama, uključujući i vojne intervencije, zadržati položaj neprikosnovene vodeće sile cijelog svijeta. Naravno, na dugi rok to je neodrživo. Počele su se pojavljivati zemlje s velikim potencijalima, zemlje koje su tražile svoje mjesto na svjetskoj sceni i koje nisu pristajale na unipolarnost, nego su već i samim svojim postojanjem promicale multipolarnost. Dakle, uzdrmana je i sama osnova međunarodnih odnosa koji su, a to nikako ne smijemo ispustiti iz vida, bili već temeljito nagriženi u vrijeme unipolarizma. Kada su se nemilice gazila načela na kojima je počivala konstrukcija međunarodnih odnosa nakon Drugog svjetskog rata. Paralelno sa svim time tekao je i proces marginalizacije Ujedinjenih naroda i kvazi legitimiranja unilateralnih akcija, poput proglašavanja sankcija protiv ove ili one zemlje. Sve to pod firmom promicanja demokracije i ljudskih prava, a zapravo samo s jednim jedinim ciljem, zapravo samo ciljem nametanja što većem broju zemalja, osobito ako su one na strateški značajnim pozicijama, određenog modela društveno-političkih i gospodarskih odnosa. Jesu li nesvrstani na to reagirali? Nisu. Pokret nesvrstani zadovoljio se time što je formalno i dalje samo postojao. Održavani su sastanci na vrhu koji su privlačili sve manje pozornosti svjetske javnosti. Naprosto zato što su se nesvrstani zadovoljili počivanjem na lovorikama neporecivih zasluga iz vremena krajnje opasne blokovske podjele i utrke u naoružavanju. Zadovoljili su se, da tako kažem, recikliranjem nekih općih mjesta, ali ostajući slijepi i gluhi na ono što se događalo oko njih. Da, zadovoljili su se i time što tvore većinu u općoj skupštini Ujedinjenih naroda. Hrvatska najbolje zna kako to nije posve nevažno, jer je svejedno upravo zahvaljujući podršci nesvrstanih izabrana kao nestalna članica u Vijeće sigurnosti. Nije nevažno, ali je daleko od toga da bi bilo dovoljno. Dodatni je problem pokreta što on danas okuplja veliki broj vrlo raznorodnih zemalja, a što među nekima od tih zemalja dolazi i do otvorenih sukoba. Raznorodnost sama po sebi ne bi trebala biti opterećenje, ali ako ona podrazumijeva i toleriranje evidentnog nedostatka, makar i natruha demokracije, onda to za pokret nije dobro. Čini ga naprosto nevjerodostojnim, baš kao što ga čini nevjerodostojnim činjenica da se njegovi članovi međusobno sukobljavaju, dok pokret zagovara mir u svijetu. Pa što bi onda pokret morao učiniti danas? Morao bi se ponovo izboriti za svoje mjesto na međunarodnoj sceni, jer ona ga je, ponovit ću to još jednom, u najvećoj mjeri izgubio. Kao prvo, pokret bi morao napraviti neku vrstu samoanalize, utvrditi u kakvom je stanju, u kakvom okruženju postoji i što u takvom okruženju, dakle danas i ovdje hoće i možda je najvažnije što može. Kao drugo, morao bi na prikladan način reafirmirati ona ključna načela na kojima se okupio prvi puta prije 60 godina i koja, nažalost, svakim danom ponovo postaje sve aktualnije. To uključuje i načelo nemiješanja unutrašnje stvari drugih i pravo svake zemlje da se razvija u skladu sa svojim specifičnim potrebama, ali i vraćanja Ujedinjenim narodima onoga mjesta na kako su bili postavili njihovi tvorci i idejni začetnici. I kao treće, morao bi smoći snage i javno se jasno i odlučno očitovati o svim aktualnim problemima u svijetu u kojima živimo. Iz dana u dan, ako je potrebno konsenzus o nekim najaktualnijim pitanjima, moralo bi biti moguće postići. Ne mislim tu samo na rastući jaz između razvijenih i onih u razvoju, nego i na rast siromaštva, pa i u razvijenim zemljama, na globalni terorizam, na sve akutniji problem izbjeglica i na suočavanje s istinom o tome što ih je pokrenulo, kao i na obnavljanje oštrih podjela u svijetu, mada ne više na nekadašnjoj blokovskoj osnovi i na ponovno zahuktavanje utrke u naoružavanju, odnos prema pandemiji i da ne spominjem. Ukratko, pokret nesvrstanih morao bi prerasti ulogu glasačke mašinerije u Ujedinjenim narodima, vratiti se onoj ulozi u kojoj je stvoren, a to je uloga ključnog borca za mir i sigurnost u svijetu i za ravnopravne odnose među svima, kao i za rješavanje svih sporova mirnim putem. I mora bi ponovo izboriti pravo građanstva za načela miroljubive aktivne koegzistencije, poznato još iz Bandunga. Primijetili ste, puno sam puta upotrijebio izraz morao bi. Da pokret nesvrstani morao bi učiniti mnogo toga, ako ne želi ostati samo uspomena iz nekih dalekih dana. Ne mislim da pokret to ne može, upravo suprotno, pokret to može, ali i više od toga. Pokret nesvrstanih to mora, jer prilike u svijetu rapidno se pogoršavaju i traže aktivnu ulogu jednog korektivnog faktora. Traže glas razuma u džungli nerazuma. Pokret nesvrstanih već je jednom takvu ulogu odigrao. Ne vidim zašto ne bi i opet. Po čemu smatram da tome naporu mogu i moraju pridonijeti ili zemlje slijednice Jugoslavenske federacije, koje se danas ponašaju tako kao da bi najradije taj dio svoje prošlosti zaboravile ili pokušavaju pokret iskoristiti za svoje uske potrebe i ciljeve. I sve što sam rekao sam kao jedini predsjednik Republike Hrvatske koji je u svojstvu promatrača aktivno sudjelovao u radu 2 sastanka na vrhu pokreta nesvrstanih. Bio sam na tim sastancima upravo zato što sam shvaćao kolika je potencijalna uloga pokreta nesvrstanih u današnjem svijetu, nego i kolika je potreba za takvom ulogom. Hvala.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, I gladly accepted the invitation to present some of my thoughts on the topic, the role of the non-aligned movement today. I said gladly because I really think that this topic should be discussed both today and seriously. Namely, not with phrases, not with nostalgic, but very seriously and analytically. It is my starting point and at the same time the reason why I insist on a serious approach to the thought that the non-aligned movement, 60 years after its appearance on the international scene, is losing its breath, to use the mildest possible expression. It would be more accurate to say that all that remained from the movement is the majority in the United Nations General Assembly, which is not insignificant, but it is far from what the movement could and must be. not to mention how far it is from what the movement once was. I will not bother you with repeating general points, what is well known to everyone, how the movement operates today in changed conditions, how the situation in the world is not what it was 6 decades ago, how the global framework for the movement is more unfavorable today than it was when it first appeared. This is the truth, and we all know it well. But can they be excuses for the practical disappearance of the movement from the international scene? Maybe someone will be bothered by the expression disappearance from the international scene, but let's be objective and look the truth in the eyes. Can anyone remember even one noteworthy initiative of the non-aligned movement after the end of the Cold War, more precisely after the disappearance of the Berlin Wall? I don't remember any. If a radical change of circumstances in the world can be taken as a mitigating circumstance when we seek to analyze why the non-aligned have practically disappeared in silence, then that mitigating circumstance can only be valid for a limited time. I want to say the following: the changed situation in the world has to, and I repeat, has to result in the non-aligned re-examining their place and role in the changed world. That, however, did not happen. The answer to the question why, it is multi-layered. First, the changes were sudden, for many unexpected. Secondly, the disappearance of the bloc divisions seemed to nullify the main reason for the existence of the non-aligned movement. And third, most important, so it seemed to me at least, in the large group of the non-aligned lacked leaders with vision. Politicians like Nehru, Nasser, and Tito were missing. I do not forget also Sukarno and Nkrumah. There were none who would see and understand that the practical disappearance of socialism from the world stage, at least the model we once knew until then, as what the West understood as its victory over the East, that is the victory of capitalism over socialism, did not abolish the need for the existence of the non-aligned. On the contrary, everything we have witnessed in the past 3 decades have only confirmed that the non-aligned are still needed. Because what happened? The West saw the collapse of socialism as its historic victory and began to behave in a victorious way, which, among other things, resulted in the transformation of the bipolar world into a unipolar one. The United States seized and endeavored with all its might, including military intervention, to maintain position of the undisputed leading power of the world today. Of course, in the long run, it is unsustainable. Countries with great potentials began to emerge, countries that saw their place on the world stage and did not accept unipolarity, but their very existence promoted multipolarity. Thus, the very basis of international relations were shaken, which, and we must not lose sight of it, were already roughly eroded at the time of unipolarism, when the principles on which the construction of international relations after the Second World War were relentlessly trampled. In parallel with all this, there was a process of marginalization of the United Nations and quasi-legitimization of unilateral actions, such as the proclamation of sanctions against this or that country. All this under the mark of promoting democracy and human rights, and in fact with only one single goal: to impose on as many countries as possible, especially if they are in strategically important positions, a certain model of socio-political and economic relations. Did the non-aligned react to this? They didn't. The non-aligned movement contented itself with the fact that formally it still existed. Summits were held that attracted less and less attention from the world public. Simply because the non-aligned were content to rest on the laurels of undeniable merit from the time of the extremely dangerous bloc division and armament race, they contented themselves, so to speak, with recycling some common positions, but remaining blind and deaf to what was happening around them. Yes, they were content to form a majority in the United Nations General Assembly. Croatia knows best that this was not entirely unimportant, because at one time, precisely thanks to the support of the non-aligned, it was elected as a non-permanent member of the Security Council. It is not unimportant, but it is far from enough. An additional problem of the movement is that today it brings together a large number of very diverse countries, and that there are open conflicts between some of these countries. Diversity in itself should not be a burden, but if it also implies tolerating even the slightest hint of the lack of democracy, then that is not good for the movement. It makes it simply untrustworthy, just as it is untrustworthy by the fact that its members are in conflict with each other, while the movement advocates peace in the world. So what should the movement do today? It should fight again for its place on the international scene, because, I will repeat it once again, it has largely lost it. First of all, the movement should do some kind of self-analysis, determine what condition it is in what environment it exists, and in such an environment, therefore today and here, what it wants, and perhaps more important, what it can do. Secondly, it should reaffirm in an appropriate way those key principles on which it first gathered 60 years ago, and which unfortunately are becoming more and more relevant every day. This includes the principle of non-interference in the internal affairs of other states, and the right of each country to develop in accordance with its specific needs, but also to return to the United Nations, the place to which they were set by their creators and founders. And thirdly, it should find the strength to speak publicly, clearly and decisively about all the current problems of the world we live in, every day if necessary. It should be possible to reach a consensus on the most acute issues. I do not mean here only the growing gap between developed and developing countries, but also the growth of poverty, even in developed countries, global terrorism, and the increasingly acute problem of refugees, and the confrontation with the truth about what triggered them, as well as the reconstruction of sharp divisions in the world, though no longer on the formal bloc basis, and to the resurgence of the arms race and attitude towards the pandemic, not to mention. In short, the non-aligned movement should outgrow the role of the voting machinery in the United Nations, return to the role in which it was created, and that is the role of a key fighter for peace and security in the world, and for equal relations among all, and for resolving all conflicts peacefully. And it should fight again for the right of citizenship, for the principles of peaceful active coexistence known as Bandung. You've noticed I've used the term should many times. Yes, the non-aligned movement should do a lot of things if it does not want to remain just a memory from some distant times. I don't think the movement can't do that. On the contrary, the movement can do it. But more than that, the non-aligned movement must do it, because the situation in the world is rapidly worsening and seeking for the active role of a corrective factor, looking for the voice of reason in the jungle of irrationality. The non-aligned movement has already played such a role once. I don't see reason why not again. I believe that the successor countries of the Yugoslav Federation can and must contribute to this effort, which today either act as if they would rather forget part of their past or try to use the movement for their narrow needs and goals. And all that I said as the only president of the Republic of Croatia who, as an observer, actively participated in the work of 2 summits of the non-aligned movement. I was in those meetings precisely because I understood the potential role of the non-aligned movement in the world today, but also the need for such a role. Thank you. Thank you very much, President Mesić. Hvala vam lijepa na vašem izlaganju. We are very pleased to have the ambassador of Azerbaijan, His Excellency Mr. Fakhraddin Gurbanov, as our next speaker. The Republic of Azerbaijan is a member state of the non-aligned movement and hosted the non-aligned movement summit in 2019. Also, the current chair of the movement is the president of Azerbaijan, Mr. Ilham Aliyev. Ambassador Mr. Gurbanov will share with us the key activities and plans for strengthening the role and impact of the non-aligned movement in addressing global issues for the upcoming period. Mr. Gurbanov, the floor is yours.
Good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me to participate. My special thanks to the organizers of the event, and greetings to participants of this very important conference. the Republic of Azerbaijan took over the chairmanship of the non-alignment movement in October 2019, being the second largest international political organization after United Nations. The movement provides a broad and inclusive forum for political consultations and practical cooperation. Throughout its history, the movement has played a fundamental role in strengthening international peace and security. During 60 years of its existence, the member states of non-alignment movement have upheld the shared principles and values and have shown ability to find a common ground for actions that lead to mutual cooperation. The movement persistently called for strict adherence to the norms and principles of international law and has provided major trusts in the areas of disarmament, better economic well-being, social justice, and environmental sustainability. Some of the most important achievements of the 20th century, such as decolonization and the emergence of global social development agenda, are among the movement's impressive contributions to the world so far. Yet, there is still a way to go until the long-standing goals of the movement, such as peace, security, development, economic cooperation, and the democratization of international relations, inspired by the United Nations Charter and the Bandung Declaration, are ultimately realized. The Republic of Azerbaijan became the full-fledged member of non-alignment movement in May 2011 and declared its strict adherence to the founding principles of the movement. It pursues an independent foreign policy, and it is not a party to any military alliance. At the same time, Azerbaijan is a rapidly developing country that puts a special emphasis on sustainable development, democratization, fostering the respect for human rights and social justice. Azerbaijan assumes the chairmanship of the movement in a critical time of all member states of NAM, which necessitates concerned and effective response to the challenges of contemporary world. Chairmanship of Azerbaijan to the movement coincided with the 65th anniversary of Bandung Principles in 2020 and the 60th anniversary of the establishment of non-alignment movement in 2021. Both anniversaries provide an excellent momentum for the NAM member states to take stock of the achievements made so far and reflect upon how shared vision and combined strengths could respond to the multifaceted and emerging challenges that the world continues to face. During 60 years of its existence, our movement has proved itself to be one of the key players in the international relations, as a system that promotes multilateralism and diplomacy for peace. It is not coincidence that 24th April, the closing date of the historic Bandung Conference of 1955, had been declared by the United Nations General Assembly as International Day for Multilateralism and Diplomacy for Peace upon the initiative of the NAM member states. The main task before the non-alignment movement today is to adjust its role to new realities in the geopolitical landscape by promoting and upholding its founding principles. It is more than ever critical that non-alignment movement member states remain united and steadfast in view of emerging threats and challenges to the international peace, security, and development. Timely reaction to and application of effective remedies on situations that affect the member states is of most importance. NAM should immediately react to the emerging situation requiring its urgent attention so that the member states could rely on the strength and support of movement during their hard times. The member states should ensure that the movement is a dynamic and effective mechanism to represent, coordinate, and support their interests and priorities in an adequate and timely manner. In its capacity as the non-alignment movement chair, Azerbaijan spares and will spare no effort towards further enhancing the role and visibility of the movement as anti-war and peace-loving force, promoting, preserving, and strengthening multilateralism with the United Nations at its core. We will actively work on promoting founding principles of the non-alignment movement, increasing its effectiveness, as well as strengthening unity and cooperation among the member states. The recent environmental, economic, and social indicators demonstrate that the models of progress and development need to be modified and adapted. Conflicts, aggressive expansionist policies, environmental degradation, human rights abuses, financial crisis, coupled with the other threats such as terrorism, separatism, transnational organized crime, and extremism continue to affect millions of people around the world. Therefore, the world needs more than ever commonly agreed rules and effective global institutions to ensure security, development, and respect for human rights. As the next chair of non-alignment movement, Azerbaijan, as a chair already presently, spare no efforts towards further enhancing the role and visibility of the movement as an anti-war and peace-loving force promoting, preserving, and strengthening multilateralism with the United Nations at its core. The main task before movement today is to adjust its role to new realities in the geopolitical landscape by promoting and upholding its founding principles, which continue to be as much valid as relevant as they were actually when incepted. As we are all aware, the already fragile global situation has been further exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Operative and result-oriented response by non-alignment movement to the pandemic and its social humanitarian impact on member states has been exemplary. United Nations General Assembly special session initiated by the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan on behalf of non-alignment movement member states positioned our movement at the center of global efforts in the fight against pandemic. Except contributing to its increased visibility, COVID-related initiatives have tested responsibilities and operability of our movement to the growing challenges, the result of which was encouraging. The objective of ensuring a peaceful, just, and prosperous world is hardly achievable if the universally accepted fundamental values, norms, and principles, including those enshrined at the United Nations Charter and Bandung Declaration, are overtly disregarded as misinterpreted so as to whitewash aggressions and other illegal actions. The current situation necessitates new governance mechanisms supported by high-level political engagement and legally binding instrument, such as a treaty or other international legal instrument on the pandemic preparedness and response, which would provide a much-needed overreaching framework for global cooperation and enhanced solidarity among nations. I thank you for your attention and wish successful work for this event.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. We are very honored to welcome our next speaker, Mr. Budimir Lončar, former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador and Chair of the Ministerial Board of the Non-Aligned Movement, former advisor to 2 Croatian presidents, Fellow of the World Academy of Art and Science. Also, Mr. Lončar was 2 years president of the Croatian branch of the Pugwash Conferences on Science and World Affairs. Mr. Lončar, we talk about the non-aligned movement in context of uncertain and conflicting international developments. Mr. Lončar, the floor is yours.
Thank you. ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen.
Samo ono što bude zaključno, ja znam otprilike šta govorim.
It is my pleasure to be here today on the valuable gathering, and I would like to thank to the organizers for the opportunity to talk about the interconnection of science, security, politics, and global issues with eminent speakers and experts in this area. As it was previously mentioned, I was president of the Croatian Pugwash group for 2 years. I am very proud of that. Because of that, I warmly congratulate to the new elected president, Mr. Zvonko Šikić, and vice president, Ms. Ana Jerković. I wish you a lot of success in your work. This conference is a sign of great start into your mandate as leaders of the Croatian Pugwash group. And I believe that you will continue with your work as efficient and dedicated as you did so far.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dear friends, here and now, I'm going to give you my view on the role of the non-aligned movement in the past and in the contemporary multilateral world. This year marks the 6th decade of founding of non-aligned movement, and let me state categorically one thing. The movement has greatly changed the picture of the world at that time. Let us never forget, this is historical fact. Today, in framework of globalization of the world that brought to the surface many new problems. In the context of the COVID-19 pandemics, in an economic situation that is characterized by widening gap between developed part of the world and even very unequal state on national level in many countries, practically in all the world. With good reasons, we ask the following question. Where is the world going to? And where are non-aligned today? Owing to the technological revolution and other globalization factors, this world profited from growing interdependence and well-being, but in the same time, it had never been so disunited as today. As the Italian revolutionary philosopher Antonio Gramsci used to say, when a system collapses and other has not yet been constructed, then only chaos reigns in such a world. Today, we are witnessing the implication of the overcoming of the Cold War, exactly what the non-aligned movement was striving for. But instead of establishing new economical and political order in the world, we have been overwhelmed by unilateral that continue to exclude the poorest and the weakness from participating in decisions that affect the future of our planet and humankind. The technological revolution, alongside with the catastrophic climate change that we witness today, affect all discrepancies in today's world. We are very near today to a global and planetary catastrophe, and nothing can be done in the atmosphere where unilateralism pretends to replace the collective decision about the future of our planet. As we cannot rely only on the self-asserting and pretension unilateral approaches, so to solve the vital problem of our planet, in the same manner, we cannot rely exclusively on the power of market to solve the deep crisis of poverty, inequality, and diseases that affect today's world. Obviously, the dynamics of the world market give new impetus to the development of production forces. It is a powerful tool in resolving some of the global problem, but not all of them. Let me repeat and stress, the globalization of the world market cannot solve all problems that the human race is faced today with. Globalization must be put in function of the well-being of all inhabitants of the world. What we need today is establishment of the new world order that would be characterized not only by the overcoming of a new Cold War, but by strong multilateralism that would permit all countries to take part in decision about their fate, about our fate. The world has undergone dramatic changes over the past 30 years. The technological revolution, the climate crisis, the pandemics, poverty, terrorism, and backwardness of change the world. In this new world, we are facing new challenges. These challenges cannot be approached neither by a unilateral approach, nor by the decisive leverage of the big power that cannot solve the problem by themselves. If ever, now is the time for re-emergence of the movement for the decisive entering on the world politics stage of the developing and the prevailing countries. I'm almost tempted to say it is now or never. The movement has changed and still existence bigger than ever, but not present enough. Non-aligned movement must adapt to these changes, circumstances, must change too, substantially. However, the fundamental ideas formulated in 1961 in Belgrade did not lose importance or its meaning. On the contrary, establishing a new world order based on common interest and shared responsibility has been and remains the demand of the majority of the humanity. The movement recognized this demand and articulated in its consistent program and policies. There are those who think that with the end of the Cold War and the confrontation between blocs, the time of alignment has passed. They are wrong. Although the movement did have and still has some difficulties to adapt to the new situation on the world scale, it has in the last 20 years convincingly proved those prophets of the death to be wrong. The basic problems of the world today are the rising poverty, inequality, disbalanced growth, technological dependence, inadequate response to diseases, pandemic and endemic. All these problems request the participation of all nations in debating and deciding about our common future. They simply cannot be resolved or even tackled without them, all of them. This agenda requires the action of the revitalized non-aligned movement. Tensions among the great powers are escalating on the daily basis, and this can lead to the catastrophe. A strong and influential movement is also precondition for the necessary restoration of the so needed multilateral decision-making process. The new international order must enable an efficient fight against irreversible climate change, against the widening gap between the North and South, rising inequality in all economies, it means in the global world, and also for democracy, but democracy shaped in accordance to the specific and needs of every country and not imposed in an uniform formula from outside, and particularly not by export of democracy by military strength. For this proposition to become true, we have to establish new multilateral mechanism by which global problem can only be solved by global process management. The multilateral model of international relation must be necessarily based on the system and network of the international organization, precisely speaking about United Nations, in which both smaller, poorer countries can participate with equal rights and dignity. In conclusion, let me say that such new world order is not possible if we continue to believe blindly in the invisible hand of the market. We need to concerted action of the actors, both those governmental and non-governmental, both those big and small, both those rich and poor. The challenges we face today must be stimulus for considered, coordinated action, and the non-aligned movement must be in the forefront of such endeavor. This was always its role. This is the role of today, especially today. Only such way we can restore hope in the future and save the world for the succeeding generation. There is great among things to do. Therefore, we should not lose time in the decisive struggle for the preservation of our world, of our future. Time is running out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lončar, for sharing your thoughts on the role of the non-aligned movement today. And as our last speaker today in this panel, we are really pleased to have with us a prominent scientist, namely academician Asim Kurjak, President of the International Academy of Perinatal Medicine and Director of the Ian Donald Inter-University School of Medical Ultrasound, Fellow of the World Academy of Art and Science, European Academy of Sciences and Art, International Academy for Human Reproduction, Italian Academy of Science and Art of Reggio Puglia, Academy of Medical Sciences of Catalonia, Honorary Member of the American Institute of ultrasound in medicine and biology, regular member of the Russian Academy of Science and Art, and many others. According to the Stanford list, academician Kurjak was the most cited Croatian scientist in 2020. Academician Kurjak represented the topic. Among the non-aligned countries, the Croatian Medical School Ian Donnell has done more than politics. Mr. Kurjak, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Mr. President Mesić, Your Excellency, Ambassador Gurbanov, all other guests. At first, it may seem paradoxical that one scientist and medical doctor speak at the more political conference and roundtable, but I hope you will agree at the end of my presentation, combining oral and movie, that there is something to be said in the line of the actual discussion of non-aligned movement today. I've been speaking about school, which is now accepted as the success story in globalized medicine, named after Nobel Prize winner Ian Donnell, Scottish gynecologist who pioneered ultrasound. Ultrasound today is the most useful diagnostic technique we have in medicine in general, and there is no field of clinical medicine in which ultrasound nowadays is not used. Before I inform you, I like to pay tribute to some very important persons for development of Donnell School as a global success. First one is academician Ivo Schlaus, who in 1981 was among a few founders of Donnell School at the Inter-University Center in Dubrovnik, and since that, Ivo was closely connected with most of our successes, even taking part in some of our meetings like in Doha, Qatar, and in Dubai. Second one, and I will show some of illustrations for that to prove it, is President Mesić, who at his 2 terms as the president of Croatia helped as much as he could and was always ready to join us, and even including representatives of our school in 3 state delegations to visit Iran, Libya, and Qatar. That was very, very stimulating for some of us, enthusiastically represented in Donnell School. And I like also to thank to His Excellency, Mr. Budimir Lončar, who from his position, America, Indonesia, later on in Yugoslavia, was permanently interested to see how we are developing. And for all of you, I'm going to illustrate with few slides and then with the movie, how this successful global story strongly connected with non-aligned movements. And just to tell you, we now have 69 non-aligned countries who are in our chain, who are having our system of education. Among them, Your Excellency, Mr. Ambassador Gurbanov, we have in Azerbaijan very active school, and you can recognize here, if camera permit, this is Lady Fatma, who is director of school, and school has its journal, who is 15 years old, and as you can see at the end, quoted by the very serious scientific informatics sources, giving scientometric data on the, giving us information on the rating of Donnell School, how and why Donnell School is now represented in 142 countries, 69 non-aligned, and we are also in very well developed, like America, like Spain, like Italy, like France, and even Japan. All of these illustrations you will see soon in the movie. But 40 years of the existence of Ian Donnell School is a remarkable time. But that time had no parts in which we haven't been active, no poses in which highly specialized courses have been done. all over the world. Even during this endless pandemic of Corona, we had 6 webinars speaking online on the actual problem in our profession, because science or medicine combines science and art. And it is not enough to have knowledge. Much more important is to give knowledge, to know how to do education in proper time. And education is lifelong process. There is no period in which you can say, now I will stop to read. So we had 11,000 participants all over the world last year. And there is an increase, linear increase of the number of participants. And we do believe that there are 2 reasons why we are so successful. First one is there is no money involved. We are self-financed. We do not receive money from anybody. And there is no politics, whether you like it or not. No politics in its wide term. So I will now show you few slides illustrating rapid development and illustrating how this Donald School became truly global. And very interesting is that non-aligned movement is a little bit older than our school, but our school is in significant progress, contrary to decline as President Mesić outlined in his speech. Non-aligned movement is somehow in crisis, at least as we in Croatia do see it. Donald School, represented in 142 countries worldwide, is in a big progress. We have never been more successful. Our journal is 15 years old, and it's quoted in all serious databases you can see on the bottom. And we do have Donald School Library, published 37 textbooks in English and in Italian. And the school is actually present in each corner of the world, but the main attractiveness is to teach people in poor country, in developing countries, with appropriate curriculum. So, ladies and gentlemen, after giving this very short introduction, I will now ask Anna to put the movie, which is self-explanatory, even with the pleasant music, and please be next 15 minutes patient to see what we did in this largest world educational system. Second to us are University of United Nations. They have 100 members. We do have 142. Of course, they receive $1 million per year. We receive no 1 penny. So this is something different if you are non-financed and if you do take care about yourself without expecting any help from the others. Anna, can we start with the movie? Yes. Movie is self-explanatory in English.
Thank you very much, Professor Kurjak. With this, we will close this panel, and I would like to thank everyone. And just a final remark from Academician Schlaus before we put the movie, before we see the movie, which is 15 minutes long. Academician Schlaus, if you would like to say a few words for the end of this panel, so that we can see the movie of
Anna,
the Ian Donald
Anna,
School.
the movie is an integral part of the panel. I reduced my time to 7 minutes, expecting movie, including in the panel. All right, whatever you like.
Academician Schlaus.
Mr. President, distinguished participants, this is one of the best sessions we had at this conference. I'm particularly impressed by the speech given by President Mesić. Of course, I have heard many of his speeches. He was my president for the a little bit more than 10 years because he was also the last president of Yugoslavia. And we met at many conferences and so on. And I can proudly say that I am his friend. What he said was, United Nations have to be modified and improved. And a non-aligned movement is one of the things that we already tried. It worked very well, and it could be a building stone for many things to improve the UN international system, a step toward what presumably has to be the future, the global governance. Thank you.
And now we will see the movie of the Ian Donald School for the end of this panel.
"40 weeks, 3 trimesters. However you put it, 9 months is a long time. Thankfully, these days we don't have to wait that long to get a first glimpse of the unborn baby. Ultrasound scans, developed at the University of Glasgow by Professor Ian Donald, are painless, safe and reliable, an important way of checking that the fetus is developing normally and a defining moment in any woman's pregnancy. Ultrasound is vibration at a very high frequency. It's used in the animal kingdom by a variety of species as a tool for hunting and navigation. Scientists use sonar in a number of ways too, from checking for cracks in aeroplane wings to cleaning delicate pieces of jewellery. But it was Ian Donald who first harnessed this natural phenomenon into a visual technology that could be used to display images of an unborn baby. Born in Cornwall and educated in Scotland and South Africa, Professor Donald studied medicine at St Thomas's Medical School in London, graduating in 1937. After serving as a medical officer in the Royal Air Force during the Second World War, he accepted the Regius Chair of Midwifery at Glasgow University in 1954. Professor Donald arrived at his alma mater with, in his own words, the residue of a Leverhulme research grant, a rudimentary knowledge of radar from my days in the RAF, and a continuing childish interest in machines, electronic and otherwise. He had an idea that radar technology could be adapted for medical diagnosis. However, his early experiments on tumours using an industrial ultrasonic metal flaw detector were greeted with scepticism. Undaunted, the professor worked with T.G. Brown of the scientific instrument makers Kevin and Hughes to create the first diagnostic ultrasound machine. In 1958, he published his findings with John McVicker in The Lancet. The article was one of the defining publications in the field. Professor Donald's wait was over, and so was ours. The early days of ultrasound were not easy. Machines could only create fuzzy images at first. But from this difficult beginning, a new science of fetal diagnostics emerged. Today, machines can show the unborn fetus in sharp detail and even video images in 3 and 4D. Professor Donald would be pleased to know about these developments. Speaking in later years, he noted that the innumerable difficulties, setbacks and disappointments have been more than compensated for by those who have turned the subject from a laughable eccentricity into a science of increasing exactitude. He'd be pleased too to know that ultrasound is now used in many fields of medical diagnostics and also in veterinary medicine. Like X-rays, ultrasound allows us to look inside the body, but unlike X-rays, the technology is not based on radiation. By helping to create a safe and effective way of seeing inside our bodies, Ian Donald changed the face of medical and veterinary practice for the better.
We are living in a troubled world where national, religious and political differences separate people to the extent of causing disastrous wars. I think that the development of the concept of Jan Donald Inter-University School of Medical Ultrasound is a very good lesson for leaders of the world. Donald School courses are based on the state-of-art science and on friendship and collegiality. They do transcend all language barriers, all misunderstandings. And we do have now most recent development advanced fellowship, 1-year postgraduate courses for the master degree, which then can be continued with the PhD program lasting another 2 years dedicated to clinical research under mentors appointed by university. It is now 32 years since we in city of Dubrovnik established Jan Donald Inter-University School, and the progress was dramatic, being success story in globalized medicine. And as you all know, medicine and science are truly global because their very nature is global. And to produce curriculum which is equally attractive for developed and developing countries was and still is the main challenge of Jan Donald School. I welcome all the new participants. You will find friendly and stimulating and above all pleasurable team of first-class speakers and a very friendly atmosphere and interchange of opinions. Welcome. Donald School is now generally accepted as a success story in globalized medicine. We transcend all the borders, all the nationalities, all the religions. We have our motto, unity in diversity. This type of postgraduate, highly specialized teaching is now widespread in 132 countries, both developed and developing.
In Jan Donald School, we do ultrasound courses around the world, and we hope that we can find enough of young people that we can get interested for ultrasound. And this is indeed a very important field because we can detect a lot of malformations in early pregnancy. We can detect also a lot of malformations in the second trimester or even in the third trimester, and this can help to avoid morbidity and mortality in the neonate, and I think this is very important.
Jan Donald škola ima duboke međunarodne korijene. Jan Donald škola raste. Svake godine nekoliko novih zemalja se pridružuje. U Sjedinjenim Američkim Državama otvorili smo školu na Havajima 2005. godine. Svake druge godine održavamo skup, pretežno za liječnike sa Havaja, za naše specijalizante, isto za naše ultrazvučne tehničare, jer je u Americi to cijeli tim koji se bavi prenatalnom dijagnostikom i ginekološkim ultrazvukom. Havaji su daleko od svih i od Amerike i od Japana, ali u mnogo čemu mi vodimo u ultračnoj dijagnostici u Americi i Jan Donald škola nam je važna da pokažemo svijetu da i unatoč razdaljinama ultračna dijagnostika je važna za pomicanje i unapređenje zdravlja majki i djeteta. Mi smo dio jedne velike familije koju je dr. Kurjak osnovao u Hrvatskoj i koja se proširila cijelim svijetom. Mi smo vrlo ponosni na naše članstvo u toj organizaciji i jedna smo od dviju škola u Americi.
It has been my great pleasure and privilege to work with Asim during the past 30 years, building up the Ian Donald School. This is an international brotherhood and sisterhood of over 100 countries, whereby we teach physicians and sonographers throughout the world. This group is dedicated to education throughout the world. Why it has been such a success is that there's no money involved. It involves tireless and dedicated professionals who do this because they love to teach and love to share knowledge. Asim Kurjak is an organizational genius who brings out the best in people and enjoys helping them throughout the world. It's a true pleasure to work with him and to see these endeavors grow and grow in the months and years to come.
He's for us very important person. I met him many years ago. I always could count for his help. So I can say truly that now we are the friends, and I hope there will be many other opportunities to cooperate together.
It is now widely accepted that education is a lifelong process, and real education is global education. You cannot teach differently in Zagreb, Belgrade, New York, or London. So teaching is transmission of enthusiasm and explosion of new knowledge coming every day by scientific discoveries, increasing ever-growing encyclopedia of knowledge is tremendous in this modern time. Therefore, one of the main challenges in scientific and educational world is to apply appropriate teaching methods to give the best knowledge and to teach students how to develop habit of thinking instead of habit of memorizing. Virtually every 2 years knowledge is doubled. So to keep in touch with this advancement, to put all of these new theories, techniques into the practice for the benefit of our patient requires permanent learning and permanent type of successful education.
Thank you very much, Academician Kurjak, for this really inspirational, wonderful video. I think we all enjoyed it. And I think this is really a good example how science transcends all boundaries, and how, as Mr. Götz-Neunek said yesterday, that the scientists are really an international fraternity that transcends all boundaries, political, economical, cultural. And I think that the Ian Donald School is really an example on which also politicians and diplomats can learn about understanding, about dialogue, about excellence. And I thank you very much for being today with us. And I would also like to thank our speakers. President Mesić, thank you very much for your criticism. I think that the non-aligned movement really needs to hear these messages. And the good criticism is always the best way to excellence and to rethinking their role in today's world. Your Excellency, Mr. Gurbanov, thank you for being with us today. And we really wish the President Aliyev very much success in chairing the non-aligned movement. And we hope that also with this panel, we helped maybe with some messages, with some good examples, practices of good examples, and with maybe some new ideas on how he can rethink the role of the non-aligned movement. I would like to thank Mr. Budimir Lončar for your excellent presentation. Thank you very much. From your experience also, we can learn very much about the movement, about its past, but about its role in the future, about the vision, what we can do in the changing world and in the contemporary conflicts. Thank you very much. And Academician Kurjak, you as a scientist, I think that you can really prove that politics and science must go hand in hand, and that the countries of that are non-aligned and also other countries can and what they must do to act globally and to act with vision. Thank you very much once again. We will now make a short break and return with the panel on emerging technologies.